expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. Sunday, WikiLeaks released some 250,000 diplomatic cables, and while they won't destroy any international relationships, it's still an embarrassment for the U.S. The lesson learned, it's becoming next to impossible to keep secrets in the digital age. Joining me for a roundtable discussion on this and the latest between North and South Korea are CBS News national security correspondent David Martin, our chief political consultant Mark Ambinder, and national security analyst Juan Zarate. What is your reaction to this latest release on WikiLeaks?
Well, I think this is the third tranche that we've seen from WikiLeaks of revelation of secret documents. This, in my opinion, is far more destructive and undermining of U.S. interests than the past two releases that we've seen. That's because it reveals a whole scope of activity that the U.S. is engaged in diplomatically. Everything from concerns about Iran and North Korea to the Middle East peace process to concerns about terrorism. And it reveals not just titillating and embarrassing details, backroom deals and such, but really gets to the guts of internal U.S. government assessments about what we know about foreign leadership, what we know about foreign government activity, and how certain activities are actually monitored. And so I think this is really, the past revelations have been quite serious. This is incredibly serious and dangerous, I think, to our national security, and really does damage to the sense of the ability to do business with the U.S. government. If the U.S. can't keep secrets, if we can't keep quiet what is meant only for the diplomats' ears, then people are not going to want to cooperate with us, and they're not going to be very candid with us. And I think this does some long-term damage, unfortunately, and you're going to see damage control for weeks to come from the State Department.
Let's go to our David Martin at the Pentagon. David, what is the reaction there to this release, and are they taking it, obviously, I would guess, as seriously as Juan Zarate says?
Well, they are, and for one added reason, because the Pentagon was the source of all these documents in a way, because all these documents are believed to have come from one single Army private who was in a communications center in Balad, Iraq. But in this digital age, he was able to download literally close to 1 million documents that he simply walked out of the communications center with on a CD. And it amounts to the largest compromise of classified material in history, and the Pentagon is very embarrassed by that and is trying to do something about it so that it doesn't happen again. I mean, the first thing you do is you ban all thumb drives and CDs from these communications centers, but it's probably going to also restrict the flow of intelligence so that a 22-year-old private sitting in a communication somewhere does not have this kind of access to begin with.
Mark Ambinder, a political correspondent, once this information is taken, even if improperly, is there really anything that can be done to stop others from using it, be it WikiLeaks or someone in the traditional press, or is it just out there?
Well, there are two mechanisms. One is prosecution of those who had access to the information and illegally gave the information, disclosed it to others without appropriate clearance, which is what they seem to be doing against Private Bradley Manning. The other is simply shame, which is to say that the administration is doing its best to try and shame media organizations into being very careful with what they publish or to not publish some of the cables at all. But they really don't have too many weapons in their toolkits. Once this information is out, it's out. And in some ways, it's in the administration's interest, once the information is out, to try and contextualize it as much as possible, lest it be read wrongly. All these internal conversations that Juan Zarate mentions. Indeed, Juan, you are listed as the recipient of some of these cables, so it must have been surreal for you to see your name there. But there's really not much they can do, Cheryl.
Yeah, Mark, that's a good point. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, I get a little bit sick to my stomach actually reading some of these things. Not because there's anything criminal or any abuses being revealed, which is apparently what WikiLeaks is trying to do, but instead it's because the assessments and the scene setters and all of the cables that are there that are part of the day-to-day communications within the U.S. government are intended to be candid assessments of what we know and think about foreign leaders, foreign governments, their positions, not only on issues between the U.S. and that country, but also their opinions of other countries, other leaders. And so it's, in my opinion, an embarrassing and really damaging set of leaks because it really gives a window into what the U.S. government is thinking behind the scenes, behind closed doors, about our foreign counterparts. Some of these things are very raw, candid assessments, things that are never intended to even be presented to a foreign government. In fact, some of these documents are secret no foreign, meaning they're never to be shown to a foreign government. But they're never even supposed to enter into the diplomatic discourse. And part of the art of diplomacy, if you will, is to soothe out the rough edges that is part of the day-to-day global diplomacy that we're engaged in. What this revelation does is it reveals that sort of ugly underbelly of day-to-day diplomacy in a way that was never intended. And I think that creates huge problems for the U.S. government.
Quickly, then we're moving on to another topic, but how was it that your name was in the documents?
Well, I was former Deputy National Security Advisor for Combating Terrorism in the White House, coordinating all our counterterrorism and transnational threat activities. I was also an Assistant Secretary of Treasury. And so, no doubt, my name appears not only in distributions, where I would be tagged to read certain cables, but I may be actually mentioned in cables. I haven't seen those, but a little bit surreal now being on the outside reading my name in these releases. And
quickly, David Martin, if you will, if you were the head of WikiLeaks, would you be afraid for your safety?
I don't know if I'd be afraid for my safety. I'd be afraid for my freedom, though. I think this is going to agitate more governments to take legal action against Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks. And that includes this rape investigation that's going on in Sweden, which the Swedish government now seems to be quite serious about pursuing. So he's going to have people looking to lock him up for some reason, if not for leaking the documents. If they can't make that a crime, they'll try to find something else in his life that was a crime so that they can get him off the street.
All right, we want to move along to talk about the tensions between North and South Korea. First, I want to ask Juan just for a quick assessment. How dangerous is this to us here in America?
Well, I think it's dangerous in a couple of ways. We know that North Korea is unstable. They're going through a succession in Pyongyang. Kim Jong-il passing on power, at least attempting to his youngest son, Kim Jong-un. So there's succession battles underway. They're also being quite belligerent, and they're being quite open as well about their nuclear capabilities, having revealed to U.S. scientists this new facility for uranium enrichment. So North Korea is a source of instability, potential war in the region. That's not good for the U.S. We have troops in the region. The other big problem for the U.S. is North Korea is a source for proliferation. In fact, in these leaked documents, you've got information from the U.S. government indicating that North Korea has provided missiles, very, very good and well-developed missile technology to Iran. And so that demonstrates, again, the problem of a North Korea that is not only nuclear capable, but willing to sell to the highest bidder its technology. And so in a couple of ways, the conflict and tension in Korea directly affects the U.S.
David Martin, in some ways, it's a fairly simple thing to say that an unfriendly nation has attacked an ally of the United States, a place where we have troops. What are the challenges to the U.S. in deciding what steps to take?
Well, the aim here is first and foremost to avoid a war which would be just a disaster for everybody on the Korean Peninsula, north and south. But you can't just keep continually rewarding bad behavior by North Korea by agreeing to whatever their demands are. So right now they're trying to counter with this show of force, a big exercise off the west coast of Korea involving a U.S. aircraft carrier. But then that runs into a different set of objections from China, which doesn't like U.S. Military maneuvers within its 200-mile economic zone, which is a zone it claims off its coast, which is not recognized as a boundary in international law. So it's this constant balancing with you're working against this regime, North Korea, which you're not entirely sure is making rational decisions, and you're trying to work with a regime, China, which is always operating in its own very narrow self-interest, and goes back to the 1950s when U.S. troops were marching through North Korea toward the Yalu River, the boundary with China, and that's what they remember best.
Mark Ambinder, what are the political considerations? Will we at some point get a very clear message from the Obama administration, do you think, as to what they think needs to be done as a result?
Probably not. One of the dilemmas of this policy is that seemingly everything short of military intervention, which no one wants, has already been tried. The Bush administration made a fairly significant and good faith effort to try and directly bring North Korea to the negotiating table. That was essentially driven back by North Koreans' bad faith. North Korea is essentially sanctioned out. I mean, one can go back to the UN Security Council and try and get additional sanctions, but there's really not much more you can do to that country already suffering from enormous problems of starvation and famine. The political challenge for the administration here at home is essentially to convince people that what they call strategic patience, which is a very weird name for a policy, but that's how they call it, strategic patience, is the way to get North Korea to the negotiating table, not to overreact when North Korea rattles its sabers. It's going to be very hard, though, because people see South Koreans dying and no one doing anything about it.
In many ways. Thank you, Mark Ambinder. Also to David Martin at the Pentagon and to Juan Zarate. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching Washington Unplugged. Tune in tomorrow at 12:30 for our exclusive interview with former President Jimmy Carter right here on CBSNews.com. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. Have a great day.